My goal today, of course, is to have it be a little bit more kind of laid back, if you will. Would love to answer any questions as they come up. Want to make sure. All right. Are you able to see? Lulu, can you give me a thumbs up sharing the right screen? I've been known to share the wrong screen before. You would think I would be better at that now in this post-pandemic environment. But anyway, so today what we're going to be talking about, brief icebreaker just to talk about a few articles that have come out recently. Just would love to kind of share our thoughts, hear your thoughts as well. But then we're going to jump into Flint PD, so brief introduction. Really, this session is more a train the trainer type of session to go over different types of PD. So we're going to be covering PD from a perspective of Flint for beginners. And then we're also going to cover an outline for Flint leveling up. So I'm sure you have some teachers that have already been utilizing Flint a little bit, and they want to learn some more tips and tricks, things of that nature. So we're going to cover both of those, and then also go into some other tips for making sure that you're preparing your PD, and then maybe some discussion questions, and then of course jumping into Q&A as well. So let me go ahead and pull open the chats so we can have that. And again, this recording is going to be available. It'll be available later, so hello to the people in the future. And then of course we're going to be able to answer questions throughout as well. So one of the things that I wanted to call out was an article that came out recently from Education Week. So there's this question of, is the AI glow starting to wear off? And there are a few great quotes within there that I thought were really interesting. It's literally, the article is from Ed Week. It's only like a minute read, about a 3-minute video as well. But I thought it was really interesting that it talks about all the different products coming into schools, and oftentimes one of the biggest challenges is that there needs to be preparation on both sides. So I think a lot of schools have done a great job of creating an AI guideline for students, but haven't really done something for internally for teachers and admins as well. So I thought that was a really interesting point. And one quote that was in the video portion of it said, many educators to see this year is more and better professional development on how to use AI in education, which was into the conversation that we're going to be having today as well. Just was curious if anybody had seen that article previously, or just kind of any thoughts from we have up there right now. Would love to just leave this for us to discuss a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I haven't seen the article, but I think it's wonderfully timely because as a director, many programs, we're getting bombarded with offers and opportunities, and it's the article. I'm hoping to pull it up. And this session is giving me an opportunity to think about how to work with our instructors, but also how to evaluate what we bring into and bring focus to in the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a key part too, is that it's a collective piece, but it's also making sure that we're being purposeful in it, and it's not just adopting AI to have AI, which you see that not only in ed tech, you're seeing it in so many other environments as well. Of, well, we have AI. Well, what does that mean? Is that just a buzzword, or is that actually contributing something? And I think also it's always, yep, Charles, you beat me to it. I was just about ready to post the article. We're going to be sharing the slides as well, and it's linked within the slide so that you can look at that as well. I also want to minimize my screen real quick. One article that I was looking at as well was the Brookings Institute article that I'm sure many of you saw. It came out this week too. It literally came out yesterday. Definitely a great read as well. I think it does a good job of kind of, showing what, the kind of current state of AI is within Flint, but also, AI is within education. But one thing I thought was interesting is that it really kind of generalized AI as a whole. So, throwing ChatGPT and, Gemini and Claude and all that together, but you have, some purpose-built AIs like Flint, where it is making sure that students are safe, and it's not just giving them the answers, things of that nature. So I thought that was also a really interesting article to touch on too. Any other thoughts or questions or anything anybody would like to contribute before we jump into going in a little bit more? Sheila wrote, I think that a foundational skill is to be able to ask questions. I think teachers need this PD so that they can teach to students and how to ask questions. Couldn't agree more. I think that that's a key piece as well of, not only this expectation, because this PD is going to be very focused today on training the trainers and so training the teachers, but there is that dynamic too that the teachers have to be able to highlight and demonstrate these same qualities to the students so the students know how to responsibly use AI as well. Michaela, go ahead. Michaela and I were actually emailing earlier today even about the Brookings article too. So yes, go ahead.
So my thought on that is there are so many things coming at us and so many of the programs that we use that are integrating AI, and the prices are increasingly growing, and they're pricing us out of how we can afford to actually use as many programs. I like that Flint brings it all back together and actually kind of replaces a few of the programs and some of the things that we were looking at that were way too expensive we could do in Flint. I also like that it follows a lot of the suggestions that Brookings article had for us to keep our students safe and utilize it.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm happy it was you saying it, not me, because I can say it all day long working for the company, but it's great to hear somebody in the field that's also seeing that and saying, hey, well, Flint is actually doing those things. So again, all the more reason why I like to call attention to those. Any of you who have attended a PD that I've led in the past, we do not shy away from those conversations, because these are key aspects that I think so many individuals need to hear as they are making their decision, because at the end of the day, the teachers are the ones still running within the classroom, and they're the ones making a decision on if they're going to actually be utilizing an AI and Flint and all of that stuff. And the other thing too I think is really important is that Flint and these other AI pieces are not there to replace the full aspect of a lesson plan. It's to be incorporated as a part of. And that's coming from somebody, again, who's working for Flint. So, but that's a former teacher and me saying, hey, this doesn't need to be every single activity, every single lesson, every single week. It should be something that is within the toolbox that a teacher has and can reference. So jumping forward, I'll start to go into a little bit of what the Flint PD outline is going to be. So again, this is more of a kind of a train the trainer. I'll be giving you some of the insights. Basically, I'll have an outline of how I'm typically running my PDs, and then giving some insights of what I'm typically doing during that time frame, and we'll even demonstrate a few of those aspects today. But we'll cover the PD structure, some of the key talking points, some of the things that we really think are super important that could be oftentimes overlooked, or something to really emphasize so that your teachers are aware of those aspects. Then some interactive strategies. But again, the goal here is to equip you all with the structure and confidence to be able to help your teachers take all their learning to the next level, or to even begin in using Flint successfully. And again, the one thing I want to highlight too is that all of this is in addition to, of course, the asynchronous materials that we have. So we have Flint 101, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, that is an asynchronous training specifically on how to use Flint. I would say more at a beginner level. But we also have several other resources too. We have bite-sized videos on our website. We have our help center articles. We have the Flint community. So this is just one small piece that I think goes into the community aspect of making sure that we're there to help support teachers as they're going through their busy days, and making sure that this is something that hopefully can help save them a bunch of time, but also take their lessons to the next level as well. So again, what I want to highlight today is that I'm going to be covering two different pieces. So I'm going to literally highlight the outline that I usually have for running Flint for beginners and then leveling up, and then we'll go into some of the background pieces. Clearly, I'm not going to run through every single aspect of introduction, overview, Q&A. Like, I'm going to go ahead and highlight just some few key pieces from it, but this slide deck will be passed along to everybody. And then I even have videos that outline and demonstrate what would typically be covered in those sessions, so that you have that as a reference point. But one thing to highlight here with this introduction, though, is I think background information is always key for the skeptics, kind of similar to me highlighting those articles today. Whenever I'm doing a PD and meeting with teachers for the first time, I'm always acknowledging the article that came out over the summer where it was, I believe, an MIT study that said that ChatGPT was drastically reducing cognitive development within students' capabilities. And that's alarming for any educator, myself included, but that's the key piece, is that that's where Flint is different. Flint is not there to just spoon feed the answers to the students. And oftentimes you'll be able to see in Flint just how frustrated the students are when they're just trying to get the answers. They're trying to come up with different ways to ask the same question. And it shows that the tool is working appropriately. And also, again, you are able to see the students and what their work is and have it be in a safe and protected environment. And also highlighting that it's GDPR compliant, which I think is a huge piece as well. I know that, it's not, a very happy subject to cover, but you also probably remember that at the latter part of last year, there was an article talking about how a student had taken their life following conversations with ChatGPT. And that's where within Flint, our #1 focus is safety of students. And so with our system, it's going to be having those flags built in, not just about self-harm, about violence. We even built out a new feature that is about relationship building, where we had one instance where a student is maybe a little too friendly with the AI, and we wanted to make sure that that's going to be a flag moving forward, and that's something that we released at the start of the year. So again, safety of the students, especially safety in their interactions with AI, as well as safety for themselves, is always a huge focus for us. And I think that acknowledging that oftentimes convinces some of the naysayers in the back of the classroom during a PD to go, well, tell me more about that. So even if you can just get that intrigue just a little bit, is always going to be super helpful. Another thing that I think is always super, super important is demoing things live. I always like to call it the baking approach, if you will, which I'll highlight that a little bit more in just a sec, but I'm sure we've all seen a baking show where all of the ingredients are right there. They put it all together and then they put it in the oven and they come out and here's what that finished product will look like. That's something that I always think is super helpful to highlight to your teachers of here's how you can build it out and here's what that final product will look like. So the more you're able to demo live to show that, hey, here is how simple it can be, it also gives them insight of what questions they may have in order to build something out on their own. So one question that I typically get is, well, should I be adding documents into an activity that I'm trying to build? Absolutely. I think that's a huge piece. You can even instruct Flint to say, hey, I do not want you to bring any other outside resources in. I only want you to utilize the resources that I've added into this environment to make sure it's focusing on that. Also, I think highlighting the group features. The group features is probably one of the most important pieces. And I'll get into a little bit more of that in the next slide. But with group features, we have our new grade book. You have the ability to see analytics of how your students are doing as a whole. And you're also able to add in background information about the class to save your teachers time with prompting. I'll be able to demonstrate all of those in just a second, but just want to at least highlight that, and then I'll circle back to that. And then the other piece is, I think the main piece, especially when you're doing Flint for beginners, is to go over it, not super quickly, but to briefly go over things to highlight all of the robust features to allow for that Q&A to happen a little bit quicker, because you're going to start to get those more in-depth questions from teachers. And then you can start to highlight from there. And that's definitely my approach is, here are the different capabilities that you can do. Now, what questions do you have? And then we can circle back and go into those specific things a little bit deeper. The last thing that I would highlight too is the hands-on activity. The hands-on activity that I usually do. So when I first started working for Flint, I was just giving teachers time to build out their own activity. But I think for many of us in this room, we've probably already experienced with Flint or just prompting in general with AI, is that it takes a little bit of time to get used to prompting. So one of my favorite activities, and it's actually what I've been doing since probably the summer timeframe on, is actually having teachers go into the public library, or if an activity has already been built out in their school library, to go ahead and find an activity that's associated with their subject matter of expertise, so what they're teaching, and then duplicating it and going through it as a student to see what they like and don't like about the activity, and then making changes to it. So this activity is not only going to, as you can see here, it demonstrates the possibilities of how Flint can be utilized. It allows them to critique those activities as well, but it also builds on top of what already exists, so they don't have to feel like they're recreating the wheel every single time. So that's pretty much my approach to Flint for Beginners. Would love to open it up if anybody has any questions or wants me to expand on something prior to going into Flint for Leveling Up. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to go into the next piece there. And so, like I said, I will circle back to highlight some of these things I've talked about of demoing live. What does that look like typically? And like going in more depth into the groups. But here is kind of that next level. So I'm sure many of you have already done maybe an original PD at the start of the year, but you want to be able to take your teacher's levels of working with Flint to the next level, if you will. So one piece that I would start out with is actually a new feature, which I'll demonstrate here in just a second. So some of you may have seen this as one of the emails, but you are able to now easily convert a conversation from a chat into an activity. So it's a much more seamless process. Previously, you would have to go back and forth in a chat and then ask for summaries that you could copy and then manually go into activity, then paste it in there. You no longer have to do that. Of course, you can just build out right within an activity. But the thing that I love about our chat features is that it really is functioning like a thought partner and a brainstorming guide. So you can get a little bit more feedback there, really get the activity to be set up exactly how you would like it, and then you can move it over into that environment and then test it from there in the activity builder. I see a few things going on in the chat. Yep, I love that too. Michaela highlighted that she created an activity which walks teachers through deciding what subject/material to use to create an activity. When Sparky gave them all the settings to paste into Activity Builder, teachers were able to think about the process and walk away with an activity. I think that's always key, is when they can come with something. That's actually something I'll highlight. I'll go ahead and mention it now just because we're talking about it. I think it's always great if you can get your teachers to come in with an idea of an activity that they always struggle with. I think we all know or can relate to the fact that there's always an activity that maybe just doesn't really seem to hit as much with students, or maybe it's an activity that you really like, but it just needs a modernization. If you motivate your teachers to come in with that specific activity in mind prior to, that sometimes allows them to focus on something and really kind of build out that activity with some of the support that they're getting in real time. And I think that that's even better of an approach within this PD for Leveling Up, because it also maybe allows them to take an activity that they built previously, learn some new strategies, and learn how to improve the activity that they've already built as well. Some other pieces to talk about. Oftentimes when I'm really trying to go a little bit further in depth, you can still cover this within Flint for Beginners, but of course, as we all know, PD is a limited time frame. You want to go through all those different aspects. But really helping your teachers understand prompting. One of the things that I usually like to kind of switch the way of thinking about a prompt is thinking of it like a rubric. So if you are providing Sparky with information and you're leaving out materials, or you're leaving out specific items that you have thought of how you want the activity to flow, but it's not actually written there for Sparky to know and interpret and function off of, then you're not going to get as good of a activity, or it's not going to be exactly how you had thought of it. So I really think that, the more detailed your prompt can be, the better. Oftentimes when you have rubrics, sometimes you have examples. Here's what a good example would be, and here's what a bad example would be. Do that same thing when you're prompting. And that's something to highlight to your teachers. Give an example of what a bad interaction would be. Give an example of what a good interaction would be, and really kind of model what you want your activity to look like. And then Sparky and Flint will be able to emulate those things. And then the last piece here that I think is just so truly important is groups. As mentioned previously, and in case some of you are a little bit newer to Flint, groups are classrooms. You have the ability to build out a group that you can then add your students into, and it's a concise one spot location that all of your students are going to be able to submit their work. You would be able to put all of your activities in there. We now have a grade book that's affiliated with it. Now, just to highlight this though too, you can use groups as a collaborative environment with other teachers. I have several schools who have set up groups as a way to have it as a collaborative environment with their departments. I've also had a school recently that's working on trying to develop groups where it would be a way for them to evaluate professional development. So basically, the admin who's reviewing how a lesson may have gone, they're able to put that information in. Teachers able to put self-analysis in, or basically critiquing their own work, and then it can then do analysis of all of that information. So it's just, again, highlighting that piece to say that groups aren't just classrooms, but its main functionality is to be a classroom. So within groups, though, the nice thing is that you do have the ability to have analytics of how that class is doing. And it's a piece that I think oftentimes is overlooked, which, again, I'll show you and demonstrate in just a second. But hypothetically, I'm a teacher. I have 5 different activities that students have done, and I have parent-teacher conferences coming up in 2 weeks. I can go into the analytics within the group and say, hey, Sparky, give me an analysis of how all of my students have done, what are their areas of strength, and what are their areas of weakness. And Sparky will be able to review that information, again, based on the activities that they've completed thus far, and give the teacher additional insights. So this is something that I think is truly, truly powerful. And I think so many teachers, if they don't have group automatically set up through our rostering with SIS LMS, then they're not oftentimes creating their own groups, and therefore missing out on some really impactful pieces. And then the other thing to highlight too is that you can provide background information about a group, and then Sparky will remember that information. So as a teacher, every time I'm prompting to build out an activity, I don't have to say, this is for my 10th grade history class. It will actually automatically know that information because of what I've put in there. Again, I'll highlight all of that stuff in just a second. But I also have videos for these items too. So activities to take to that next level, I have an example there, and then overviewing groups, I have a video there. And all of this, everything that I've covered in terms of these videos and additional resources is actually highlighted within the Getting Started Guide for Teachers. So that's pretty much everything in terms of the actual format. So how I typically format it, and then some of the key pieces that I'm highlighting throughout. So I'm going to jump into Flint real quick to demonstrate a few of those things that I've talked about. But does anybody have any questions for me based on kind of the outline or anything that I've covered thus far? Do I have some examples of good and bad prompts for teachers to see when they interact with Sparky? I don't have any that I'm just going to pull off the top of my head as of right now. The one thing I will say is I think using the library is easily that perfect spot, because it allows the teachers to think critically on, is this a good activity or not? And then be able to determine, how would I improve this? So I'm going to highlight that here in just a second, where I will demonstrate a previous activity and show how to update it. So I think that will correlate to that just a little bit. Let me see here. Trying to see what other ones. I have a faculty training group that I use, Flint PD activities. Oh, amazing. That's awesome to hear. And then let's see here. Madeline put, I was just at a conference and they suggested having teachers practice prompting by creating images. It allows them to see their product and what they missed as well. I think that's a great insight, for you're trying to create an image and you forget to, write the word eyes, and therefore it creates some eyes, or maybe the eyes don't look exactly the way you envisioned it because you didn't prompt it that way. That's a really unique way to think about it, and I think a good approach there too. Let's see here. How to train / motivate teachers who don't think AI should be used at all. So Dan, that's a great question, and oftentimes one of the most challenging questions. I think that's part of the reason why I usually like to start with the acknowledgement piece, because I think there are so many teachers, a lot of that is rooted in the fact that they may not know what AI is in terms of ed tech specifically. They only know it in terms of ChatGPT and it giving the answers. I think allowing the teachers to get their hands on an activity within Flint is going to be one of those ways. So that's why I think that hands-on activity, if I go back to the previous slide real quick, allowing the teachers to go into an activity, duplicate it, and see it, then they can say, oh, I'm really impressed by this, right? One example that I would highlight too is many of you may have even experienced this at your schools. Maybe you haven't just yet, but oftentimes the group that's either most excited or most against it is the world languages department. The reason why is that they're concerned on what the experience might be, or if it's going to be very accurate, things of that nature. But those are the departments that actually end up first adopting Flint because of the massive capabilities, the speech to text, the ability to listen, to have a hypothetical conversation. And so oftentimes, my world department loves Flint. Awesome. Yes, Robert, that's definitely something that is typically the norm, but I've definitely had several people that were against it at the very beginning. And then once they go through it, they go, oh, wait, this is actually phenomenal. Here's how I could use it. And I think that kind of goes to Dan's point, though, of they were, sometimes they're originally against it, but just seeing that first experience going, oh, wow, I actually really love this, that really kind of convinces them too. So again, I think giving the background context of how it's a safe space, how it is an environment that is not the same as ChatGPT, and then allowing them to experience themselves really does win a lot of people over. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my activities real quick, just to highlight a few pieces that I talked about. So science was never my area of expertise, but I did just want to use this as a brief example to show our new feature. Clearly, this is not a great prompt, but I went into a chat and I said, hey, Sparky, let's go ahead and brainstorm a lesson that will be turned into an activity in Flint on H2O molecules. Sparky was able to give me a few questions of, basically needing some more information before trying to build it out. I said I want the visual understanding of how molecules work and the addition and subtraction of them, and this is for a middle school level. From that information, Sparky was able to outline what an activity could look like. For just basically ease of this, let's say hypothetically that is the perfect activity, that's exactly how I wanted it, then I can say, yes, create a Flint activity. If it wasn't that, I can easily provide feedback here and it would build it out. But if I scroll down, you'll see that Sparky then builds out a framework for this, and then I can just click Start Activity Builder, and it will automatically take me into the activity builder, and it will automatically paste in an outline of the activity that I was brainstorming in the chat. And you'll see here that it, after, again, as you all know, it takes maybe a second or two for those changes to be developed, but then you'll actually see an outline and everything update here to where you now have a activity that has been pre-built based off a conversation I've done within a chat. The reason why I think this is so important, number one, is again, it allows some back and forth between teacher and Sparky to really make sure that you're formulating this plan. But also, number two, I think all of you are aware that the easiest way to really start to utilize Flint is using chats. That's where most of your teachers are going to be jumping into at the very beginning. This allows for a seamless way to go from a chat into an activity and really see how an interactive AI activity within Flint is going to work. And again, I know that many of you are aware, but just in case you are a little bit newer to Flint, the session preview, I always like to frame this as this is your proofreading tool. Any of us would proofread an email before we send it out to a parent or a colleague or whatever it may be. You want to proofread and see what that activity is going to look like when you are interacting with, when it would be interacting with students. And you can simulate that automatically, or you can actually go through it as a student and see what that looks like as well. After you created the activity, can you see the original prompt? Last time I could not. Yes, you are able to see the original prompt. I'm not entirely sure in terms of last time when that may have been, but we did make an update over the summer that your previous conversation you are able to go back in and see. So if anybody had been utilizing Flint maybe at the end of last school year, yes, you weren't able to see your original prompting, but now you are able to go back in. And also I am able to go back into the chat and reference my previous conversation in the chat as well. So it saves the chat as well as this conversation when I click create activity. Let's see here. Is there a way to instruct Sparky to respond less with perfect, great idea, and the like? That starts to turn some of the teachers off because it veers into yes, a syntocratic interaction. Absolutely. So one of the things that you are able to do is you can prompt it in three different ways, really. So as a teacher, I could prompt it, hey, these are the types of words I don't really want to hear. Or you can even take that over into the learning background and goals, which I'll highlight here in just a second at the group level. So that's a space where Sparky's always going to prioritize that information, or you could even do that at the school level as well. So we've tried to make it to where, and we've made adjustments as well to where, Sparky is not, as friendly and more focused on being a teaching assistant, a guide, a tutor. And so naturally some of that positivity comes through. But if you want to veer it a little bit away from that aspect, you are able to make those adjustments. Just to clarify, it looks like the trigger to convert to an activity is conversationally in the chat, just asking for it. Is that correct? So we made adjustments. I usually like to put that conversationally in there, but it is now proactive in saying, hey, this looks like it would be a great activity. Would you like me to convert it over, and then clicking on the button? So it does do that proactively as well, but I always like to maybe outline that of like, this is what I would like it to do, but it is going to do that without prompting of a question or a statement of saying I want it to be converted that way. What from the original chat becomes part of the activity building chat? Thanks. Yep, you're welcome, Charles. So basically, this is an outline of every single aspect that was talked about. And then a summary is created from that. And so you're able to read all that information. So what was taken from the original chat is then put into this summary right here that breaks it down in a concise way for Sparky to be able to ingest it. And then from there, you can make adjustments. You can literally call out pieces that maybe you had it convert over and it left out a specific example of where you're modeling what a good example and a bad example would be, and you want to make sure that that's in there. You can prompt that within the chat as well, or you can come in here and then paste that information as well. But you'll be able to see exactly what is brought over. That is this first message right here. So transitioning over into kind of the next environment, just wanted to highlight real quick. I mentioned, I think a lot of you can envision this, but just want to highlight how I usually model kind of that baking approach of highlighting how to build out an activity. Typically I do this live, but I wanted to make sure I was cognizant of time and everything. So I use speech to text and just went through and explained a activity that I want Sparky to build. So you can see it's a activity on robber barons, and where the students are actually the experts and they have to teach Sparky. So it's more of a flipped classroom approach. And they have to identify a robber baron that the student has studied and then teach Sparky about that robber baron. And then at the end of the activity, they're going to do a Venn diagram where they're comparing that robber baron to the tech industry now to see what is similar and what is different. So this is an activity that I kind of just came up with, built out in this activity, and I can demonstrate the grading rubric, things like that. So then once I'm satisfied with showing this to the teachers, I then actually go into the activity that I've already built. And so it is literally that same one. So for me, being a history major, it's easy for me to talk about this piece. You could do this however you would like. If you wanted to demonstrate something within science or math or whatever it may be. But if you build out an activity prior to your professional developments, maybe have one or two examples of what the grades would look like, you can then highlight, hey, here's what an activity looks like when you're building it, and here's what it looks like when students are actually going through and completing the work. So then I can come through and see, oh, it looks like one of the sessions Jacob was really struggling. And you're able to highlight in real time, oh, this is actually where Jacob was struggling, and here's the prime example of it, and it takes you directly to it. And again, highlighting that that's something that is not shown to the student. So just walking through and actually highlighting these examples. I think another big piece, to go back to a question from earlier, I believe it was Dan had highlighted, how do you convince teachers that might be against using AI? Something else that I think a lot of teachers, and justifiably so, are against is the fact that they don't want AI to be doing the grading for, and that the teacher wants to have the final say. So you were able to build out the rubric however you would like, and then give those parameters that Sparky's going to grade off of, but you as the teacher have the final say. This is something that I always demonstrate in my PDs, whether it's leveling up or for beginners, because I think it's just such an important part. You can highlight that when a grade does come through, that's based off your rubric, but if you feel like there needs to be anything, whether it was worse or better, you get to make that determination. So in this hypothetical situation, I'll say it was actually a 3 to a 4 and click yes. So again, I think that's a really important piece, in highlighting that the teachers are able to provide feedback themselves, so it's not just going to be reliant on the information that is provided there. The second to last piece, the last piece in terms of activities before I flow over into groups and highlighting the strong capabilities there, is I do want to demonstrate live how I typically do the activity for teachers to go through the public library. So if I go back to my home and then I click on public library, just have the teachers go through and find an activity within their area of expertise. All they have to do is click on it. So for example, there's this Aussie word builder. I can click on that and then just click duplicate that activity. So just as a reminder, those who might be new to Flint, the public library is where people are opting to publish. Key piece here, some teachers think that when you create an activity, it's automatically put into the public library. That is not the case. You as the teacher have to decide that you want it to be published in your public or school library. So these are all volunteered activities that teachers are putting in there. So I can click on this and say duplicate this activity, and it creates a copy that is now my own, and I get to do whatever I want with it. So to demonstrate just how powerful this is, I found one earlier. This was something that somebody had posted earlier. Their name is Diana. They created a activity in Spanish, and so it was a presentation on food truck culture. And this is great, but in the hypothetical situation, let's pretend I'm a German teacher. I love this activity, but I want to do something different. I can literally go through this session and click start a session and go through it as a student to see what it's like. I can see what I do like about the activity. I can see what I don't like about the activity, and go from there. So let's say hypothetically, I want to change this. All I have to do is go into activity settings. Again, this is a copy duplicated from the library, now my own. And I can come into this environment and say that I want to make an adjustment. So this actually remembered my previous conversation. So I said, hey, Sparky, I want to, I love this activity, but I'm a German instructor and I want to go ahead and create this as a Christmas market, and it automatically makes those changes. So because of the fact, yes, this looks perfect. So let me go ahead and submit that. And so we should be able to see the changes come up. Looks like because of the fact that it saved my previous conversation, but I didn't click save, it didn't update it fully. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this live even further. So let me go ahead and go back, and I'm going to duplicate this activity again. Click duplicate, go over to it. So now I'll go into activity settings, and then I'll just demonstrate it even more live here. So, hey, Sparky, I love this activity. However, I'm a German teacher and I actually teach middle school students, and I would love to alter this activity to be a presentation on Christmas markets in Germany. Can you help me create a new activity that outlines that, but it's similar to this original activity? So I use speech to text all the time just because it saves me a bunch of time. I'm not always the fastest typer, and it just makes it a little bit easier. So you can see here that it says absolutely, I'm going to be able to go ahead and go and make it those changes, but keep the same strong structure. So it's going to think about those changes in just a second. You'll see the logo change, you'll see the language change, all of that good stuff. So yep, you can see Christmas market stand presentation. You can see all the different changes that were made. And because it's middle school, it's no longer just strictly in German. So it's then going down to that grade level. So it can see here, it says adapted to basic German skills, German verbs for German 1, I should say. And then I can, again, go through and simulate this. If I want to make any changes, if I want to add a rubric, things of that nature, I can come through and do that. So that's typically how I'm demonstrating that piece there. And then last but not least, I think just the overall importance of groups, and then I'll jump it back into the slides and I'll put it to Q&A. So here is a group that I've created. And so this is for my world history IB class. So again, it's a place that is taking in all these different activities that I can then share out to my students. So a new feature that we released at the end of December, so the end of last year, is the grade book. So you now have the ability to have a grade book here. If something is not affiliated with an actual rubric, you're just wanting to make sure that the students completed it, it will just give it a complete, or it will be blank. And then you can see the grades here. I can click on this and it'll take me directly to the activity that student completed. And some of the feedback that we've gotten, so we're actually going to be working on some enhancements to it, where you can add in activities that maybe a student has done outside of it. But one of the things that I was really surprised in a very positive way to hear from customers thus far is how much this really yields to going away from formative assessment and going more to summative assessments. And because of the fact that your rubric can really be whatever you want it to be, and then you can make the adjustments from there. That's been some really positive feedback. I know a lot of schools are going away from that formative assessment style, but we will be incorporating a weighted grade so that you are able to easily download and then upload into another environment. So it's going to have that capability too, but just wanted to highlight that this is, I think, a really helpful tool here. So the other things that are super helpful about groups is if I click on group settings on this left-hand side, it's going to show learning goals and background. And you as the teacher, you're able to provide background information about your class. So I live in Kansas City, right in this the central part of the United States here, and I live in Missouri. So I gave it the context that this is a 10th grade world history IB class. It's in Kansas City, Missouri Public Schools. But I also said that I have 5 English language learners, so I need visuals to be incorporated as well. So this is a really, really helpful piece because it's, again, going to save your teachers a lot of time. And also I think this is a really helpful piece because it's kind of that starting point to really help with differentiation. So if I create an activity right now and I don't include any visuals, which as the teacher they should be, but if I don't, it is going to be able to create some sort of image. So for example, this Valley Forge one, it actually draws out a map of what the area would look like during that time, that sort of thing. So a very, very helpful piece that will save your teachers a bunch of time. One piece of feedback that we've gotten from people is that it doesn't have a syllabus upload feature, and it doesn't at this time. We are looking into that. But one thing that we've developed on the side to hopefully help your teachers with it, if you click on Learn More, it brings up an article giving some more information about this feature, but it also has an activity. So if I click on this activity, it's a way for your teachers to be able to upload a syllabus in and provide background context about your class, or their class, I should say, and it will create a first draft of what you can paste in there. So basically, your teachers could have information based on the syllabus and everything, and then they can go through and enhance it and iterate on it, and then paste that in. And the nice thing too is that it's editable at any time. So if I want to make a change halfway through the year, to say, hey, this latter half, we're going to be focusing on these specific thing, it will then be able to do that too. So you can continue to edit and adjust it to help with your prompting. And then the last piece that I had alluded to earlier that is something I think a lot of teachers do not know about. It's visible if you can check this out real quick. So if I zoom out, you'll see that it populates, but if I'm zoomed in, it's not automatically there, but you can see it's called View Analytics. So if I click on View Analytics, as a teacher, I'm able to see areas of strength. I can then click on areas of improvement. I can see inappropriate messages that have come through. I can see a breakdown of just usage and things of that nature, but you can actually prompt it with questions. So again, I use that hypothetical situation of me being a teacher, and I have a parent-teacher conference coming up. This is something that I usually highlight within both sessions, whether it's for beginners or leveling up, that I could come in here and say, hey, give me an area of improvement and an area of success for my students. And based on the activities that are in that group, it will give a summary of those things. So it gives the teacher a little bit more insight and maybe highlight some things that they hadn't really thought about or even caught from what their students have been doing outside of Flint. So again, groups are extremely, extremely helpful there. So going back into the slides, I'll just go ahead and jump right back into some of the other tips that I have, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So one piece just for making sure that you're going to have a smooth PD, just make sure that you have your teachers assigned as teachers. Sometimes schools have it set up where, as long as they have access to the link, then it's going to assign them as unassigned, but it'll give them permission, which it's nice for getting them into the system, but it treats an unassigned individual as a student, and we don't want your teachers to be treated as a student. So just make sure that your teachers are set up with their emails and that they are set as a teacher. Ideally, utilizing SIS or LMS integration, because then groups are already created. And so that's something that I usually am working with you all on as you're going through that process. Again, making sure that you have some sort of activity that you've pre-built so that you can highlight that, because it then gives you that polished product after what you're demonstrating of how you can create something. And then one thing that I always like to highlight too is leave room for collaboration. Sometimes I have schools asking, so do you want everybody broken up into departments, or do you just want it all in one large room? I personally always think it's really helpful when you have people sitting next to people from other departments, because your history department, your science department, math department, so on and so forth, they're always going to be meeting throughout the school year and having conversations about Flint. And it's always going to be typically more of a like-minded approach. But if you bring in a PE teacher and a science teacher and a math teacher, and you have them collaborate on building an activity, the thoughts that each one is going to have might be a little bit different. And I think that that oftentimes brings about a little bit more conversation and a different way of viewing, oh, I didn't even think that I could do that with this tool. So that's one thing that I would just highlight as, you know, not a requirement, but by any means, but I think that that's something that's your teachers are going through and thinking about how to use Flint. And then the last piece here before we go into the Q&A, I just always suggest, these are just some examples, but always have a few questions out there that you can ask to your teachers. Again, I mentioned earlier, thinking about a lesson that a teacher might be struggling with, that's something you could clearly ask ahead of time, or you could ask during the session. How could Flint help you differentiate within the classroom? That is actually a piece I forgot to mention on the strengths of groups. You can create subgroups. So you could have a group within a group, and the analytics are still pulled into that same space. So you could duplicate an activity that you've created for everyone, and then have it in a subgroup that is just for your English language learners, and that activity allows for the speech to text to be on, whereas it is not enabled for your other students. So you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of go about that, which I think is helpful too. But again, just a few questions that I put up there, and I'll be, of course, having this slide deck available, and it's going to have links and all of that stuff for you all to reference and things of that nature. So I would like to open it up to any questions or comments that anybody has, especially if you've done a PD recently. Maybe call out something that worked really well, maybe something that you struggled with, and we can chat about that a little bit further, but would love to hear everybody's thoughts, and give me a chance to grab some water. Looks like there's a question in the chat. Any other features in the future roadmap that will flag copied/pasted answers for all students in one spot? So we did release a copy paste feature where you're able to click on individual pieces, but we don't have anything at this time that is at the whole class level. And Lulu is actually the perfect person to answer that question and get more context as well, because Lulu is really kind of overseeing our product and product roadmap as well. So awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Ben, for your response. But yeah, generally right now, we're looking at how to best view it in the session, because I do think like what the student pastes in should be contextualized by the session, but very open to hearing what anyone has thoughts or suggestions of for when it comes to like beyond a session, how you want to see how students are interacting.
Also, I see that Agnes put in the question as well. I start to have many activities. As we all know, once you click duplicate, it grows and grows and grows the amount of activities. How can I organize them by units, for example? So this is something that I don't want to share too much, but I can say that it is something that we're building out to have a much more organized workflow of having folders and things of that nature. I don't know, Lulu, if there's anything else that could be shared. I don't want to share too much ahead of time, since I know it's something that we're currently building out right now.
Yeah, I think what the team is looking at right now is folders. So probably like starting off super rudimentary, but eventually that might be built out further into like more curriculum style, or more like chronological activities in a way. But yeah, still very much exploring there. So if anyone has any thoughts or feedback for us, please share.
Question on plans for a dark mode. That was something that we were actually flirting with doing over the summer. But of course, a lot of other features and enhancements, like example of organization of activities and stuff, is a little bit higher on the priority list. But it's great to hear that, because I honestly, Adam, I haven't heard that request for a minute. So that's great to feedback that we can take back of maybe something that we kind of start to reevaluate as we start to modernize a little bit. I will say that just overall user experience is something that we are looking into for kind of another future enhancement that we're going to be doing on our roadmap. But we also don't want to do something that's completely drastic in the middle of the school year, just when new teachers are getting used to the product. So that would be something that will probably be taking place a little bit more in the summer time frame. But I think that could be something that's incorporated during that time. But again, I don't want to speak for the engineering team, but it's great to hear that feedback as well. Any other questions though, specifically on the PD stuff? It seems like we're definitely getting more into product features and stuff, which again, always happy to chat about, but just want to make sure that we're covering some of those aspects on preparing for a PD, training your fellow teachers, and anything that again might have worked or might have been a challenge in the past to work with. Looks like there's another question in the chat. As an administrator, I can use the analytics tool to view all chat activity for a specific student, even if it is not tied to an assignment or activity. Are teachers able to see this as well, or is this visibility limited to chat activity from students they currently teach? So when it comes to the analytics that teachers have, it is specifically for the activities within a group. The only one who has access to review conversations from a personal chat that is not linked to an activity is an admin. So that's the only individual there. So having more admins to be able to have those things flagged, so like counselors, things of that nature, would be something to make sure that I would recommend. We have had some feedback as well. Again, something that we're looking into at the very minimum by next school year, but working on as well for this current year two of seeing if we can do that, is adding another role that might be outside of an admin, so that you can have somebody that is a moderator but is not an admin level, that they could alter a lot of different things within the environment. Will the recording and presentation link be provided after the call? Sorry, I was late to join. No worries. So the recording is always available on our YouTube page, and we will send out a link to it afterwards as well. So both, if you will. Bill asked, do you have recommendations? Sorry, I have a very itchy nose right now. Do you have any recommendations or have had any customers use analytics to get an idea of the impact of the PD on a particular group of teachers? Great question. I haven't had anybody use that specifically, but the nice thing is so in our current analytics, and we are improving our analytics on the back end right now to be able to incorporate in the future to give you more insights. You are able to see currently a breakdown of activities based on subject. It's actually at the very bottom of the analytics. So say, for example, you do a presentation on math to the math department, or sorry, on Flint to the math department, science department, whichever department it may be, you're going to be able to see the evolution of that. So you can see last 7 days versus how many were created previously, and you can even prompt those questions as well. So it is something that you're able to do within analytics, but it might be either scrolling down and seeing that, or prompting with that question. What is the time length I would recommend for a PD, for example, with beginners to Flint? So the outline for both of those is typically an hour. I'm of course a teacher, so it's always about being flexible to the needs of the time frame and things of that nature. So I think 30 minutes is something that you could do, but I would suggest an hour, particularly for the beginning, just because of the fact that I think the important piece is to get the Q&A as well as get them to utilize the duplication and seeing what an activity looks like, and then making something on their own. So making sure that you're having that time built in there is going to be extremely helpful. One thing that I would throw out as a suggestion that I've seen from other schools, and it's worked out really well too, is if you actually have teachers, I know it's hard to probably get your teachers to be forced to do something and actually have that follow through, but I have had some schools assign Flint 101 as something that teachers have to complete before they attend the PD, so that the PD is less about learning the product and more about asking the questions, and they already have some of that in-depth knowledge, and we can take it to that next level, and then have them spend a little bit more time doing a hands-on project of creating an activity, duplicating something along those lines. But I think an hour is ideal. Clearly, you can do it in 30 minutes as well, but you just might need a follow-up PD later on to make sure that you're covering those pieces as well. Is it advisable for teachers to have students creating activities and then copy and use them? Would be a way to help teachers who want a little help. So for teachers to have students creating activities and then copy and use them. Erica, if you're able to unmute to just kind of share a little bit more, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that question, or just use the chat, because I want to make sure I'm understanding the question a little bit further.
Hello.
Hey.
So I have a teacher that is she has like a student that helps her do various things in her classroom, and she's like, can I have this student create activities? She's a little bit nervous with technology, and then if the student created an activity and the teacher liked it, then she would copy that activity and distribute it to the other students in the class. That's kind of it. And is that advisable or not really? I should just.
I mean, I would just be hesitant just because of the fact that, you know, the teacher is more expert on subject matter. And I understand the student might be a little bit more tech savvy, but I mean, I have cause for caution, but not to say that you can't do that. So one thing I would say, like, for example, like if the student wants to create a study guide that they would want to use for that class, that the teacher could then check and review and then it's passed along, I think that would be great. I would just be more hesitant if it's like an activity that is done within the class, that is for instruction, that is rooted in something that a student had made. But that's more so just me personally as a former educator, if you will.
Right. But if the student created the activity and then the teacher could access it, and then she would say, oh, I like this, or let me add this, and it, you know, kind of like it's just an assistant, then she's making the final changes and saying, okay, good, I've got this started, and now I feel comfortable moving forward, kind of thing.
Yeah. Actually,
go ahead, Lulu.
Oh yeah, just gonna jump in there. We do have like the student ambassador program, which we've been kind of like advertising with some of the high school students that are using Flint. And from the ambassador group, these are like students who are really involved with Flint and doing a lot with it. I've heard some examples where they are making activities for their classmates or giving it to teachers and like encouraging them to start using Flint in their class. I think like if it's a subject matter concern, maybe the teacher and student can build it together in a way. And I would just like make sure that you're reminding the teachers to like try it out, both as like maybe a student that would excel at that activity and a student that would struggle to get that range of response from Sparky. But I think from a technical standpoint, at least, there's not really much concern with like a student making it and then the teacher distributing it. I would just check that the version that the teacher is distributing is maybe not, depending on how your school is set up. But if it's like the original activity that the student made, then the student would also be able to see all of the submissions to it. And so I don't know if that's like a privacy concern for the students who might end up using it. So if you do go this route, and I think it like is definitely one to explore at least, I would just make sure that the teacher is maybe like making a duplicate of the student's original activity so that the teacher is the owner of it and the student is not.
Good call on that one. I will definitely reach out to the specific teacher I'm talking to about this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lulu, for the additional point there too. Erica put in as a question as well, has anyone had experience with training people in leadership positions in the school on Flint? They're not classroom based, so having them do actions relevant to their job context. We have actually had it was one of my favorite campfires that we did last year at the end of the school year. We had one that was on librarians as well as just staff members, highlighting how they're utilizing Flint not in a professional classroom setting. So that campfire, Lulu, if you wouldn't mind finding that, if you're able to, and we can post that in this chat here. Erica, I think it would be really helpful. Like one example that I can think of was you had school counselors. I want to say camp counselor, apologies. School counselors who are able to create activities to help them with essay reviews for college applications. We had a librarian try to put in an index of their books within the library so that students could go in and write about some of their interests, and then they would be able to have suggestions of some books within their library that they could go and check out. There's a lot of different ways in which Flint can be implemented that is not specifically classroom oriented that I would definitely strongly suggest to you. So we'll get that campfire over, but again, all of our campfires are recorded on YouTube, so you'll be able to see a few different ones within that environment there too. I didn't even realize time flies when we're having fun. It's 11:05, or 11:04 my time, I should say. So we are past the hour. Happy to stay on to answer any additional questions, but want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Thank you again for joining. Super excited to see a lot of positive comments here too. Happy to hear it was something that was really helpful to everybody. Super excited to chat more with others too. Because again, as somebody who's been leading PDs for so long, I think it's going to be great to have even more people feel empowered to lead those. But if you do feel like you need some help with planning out a PD or would like my assistance with that, that is something that is absolutely offered to everybody. So you can always reach out to me at jacob@flintk12.com for assistance there as well. Bye, everybody. Like I said, I'll stay here just in case anybody needs a little bit more. I like the suggestions about librarians, etc. Specifically interested in people in leadership roles, but I can adapt existing trainings or ask Sparky for some guidance. Absolutely. And Erica, if you do have any other things you want to ask or you would like to plan out, we can go even more in depth. Feel free to reach out. My Calendly link is always in my signature, so we can always set up a meeting to go over that as well. Yeah, for sure, Colin. We'll definitely have that recording. I'll be sharing Flint with teachers in my school division next month, and I'm sure. Yeah, so this I think will be extremely helpful. We covered it from leveling up perspective as well as for beginners. But just as I mentioned too, if there is any additional support or planning that you would like, just go ahead and reach out to me on that. Thank you, Lulu. All right, if there are no further questions, we'll just go ahead and leave it there. Again, you've got my email, so if you do have any follow-up questions that you want to just ask directly to me and not within the channel, perfectly fine. Very, very happy to chat with everybody. Happy New Year, and we'll be talking more in the near future, and we'll be having a campfire next week as well. To be honest, I wrote down what we were talking about, and I don't have that paper next to me. But we're going to be announcing that, and we'll have that that time set for. We're going to do next Thursday again for that. So thanks again. Have a great one, everybody. Praveen, yes, you can absolutely reach out to me. It's that email that was listed above, and I'll paste that in again.
Hello. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, yes, how are we doing?
Hi. I'm sorry. I would rather discuss this with you. Like, basically, I am introducing the idea of Flint controlling the narrative in the class, and teachers are able to program such a narrative. And it's the first time that teachers would be introduced to this idea, because right now we have introduced the level of AI monitoring in our school, like AI level 1, 2, 3, 4, and we tell the students like this is the level they're supposed to be practicing,
Right.
but we never know. So it's very difficult to manage the kind of AI interaction that students are having with the kids with ChatGPT around. Now, when we go to Flint, the issue that I'm trying to face here is that I'm facing right now is if I design an activity, then how do I regulate uh, the the amount of AI support that the kid gets from other browsers and then answer Flint questions?
There's no way for us to regulate other interactions, but we do have that paste history capability. But within the activity, so you're able to provide the guidelines and parameters for how the activity is actually going to function. And I have some schools that may use like a lockdown browser or something along those lines to prevent usage of an outside source. But there's no foolproof way to just say, okay, well, you can't use these other web browsers. So you can absolutely, and this is one thing I always suggest though, is that making sure that the teacher is able to read at all of these different aspects. And so if it's very clear that something was pasted in, they can absolutely put within their rubric of no pasting is permitted, no outside resources, things of that nature. It's never going to be a foolproof piece just because you can't shut down access to other pieces unless you're on site and those web browsers have been shut off and the students aren't using a mobile device.
True. I totally agree on that one.
Yeah.
But then now I would be hosting maybe a workshop or maybe an introductory workshop for teachers in my school.
Yep.
And I'm including resources like Flint.
Yep.
There'll be more resources.
Yep.
But then this is one primary resource because it offers the Socratic learning, Socratic method of interaction with the students,
Yep.
which I found personally very useful.
Mm-hmm.
And my students have come back and told me that they want me to set up a Flint activity for them
Mm-hmm.
so that they can clear their concepts.
Yep.
And that has been very positive.
Yep.
But when it comes to introducing the idea to a teacher, then what are the things that I should be careful about?
Tell me a little bit more in terms of what you mean by be careful about. Are we talking about like AI concept in general, or in terms of how to frame what Flint does? Tell me a little bit more there.
Okay, can I just reframe the question? Simply put, what are the three-step process to introduce Flint to teachers?
Yeah. So the three-step process, I think, would be that outline that I have within the beginning portion. I start with acknowledgement first off of what is Flint and what is not Flint. So basically, how is Flint different from other AIs? So that it gives that level background context that it's not there to spoon feed the answers to students. It's a way for the teachers to monitor the conversation. So that's part one. Part two is highlighting that there is a difference between chats and activities. So chats is where you as a teacher can use Flint to create a worksheet, create a lesson plan, create a rubric, so on and so forth. It's something more tangible that you can use in outside instruction versus an activity where it's an interactive conversation that you as the teacher set the parameters of. And then the third piece is then highlighting how you're able to track all of that information. So when a student completes an activity, here is what it looks like. Here's how you're able to go through and see the insights of it. And then here's how you're able to see where students struggled. And so then it puts everything in a centralized location. So background information, chats and activities, and then that group level would be the three ways that I would highlight it.
Yeah, sounds concise. Sounds quite concise.
Lovely. I'm happy to hear that because I know it's clearly a larger subject
Yeah.
than that, but if I were to dumb it down to three pieces, dumb it down being, sorry, lack of a better term, that would be how I outline it.
Jacob, can I just send you an email from my school ID or some other ID that I've been using Flint for, and maybe we can interact more on this one.
Yep, you've got my email there, jacob@flintk12.com. You're free to reach out to it for sure.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Big
Yeah,
help.
no worries. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful one. I'm going to go ahead and click end here. We'll chat more soon. Bye.